The worst night of my life started with a silence that felt louder than thunder, because Derek Cole did not even bother to argue with me anymore. He just stared past my face like I was a broken appliance that kept making noise, and I stood there in my green nurse scrubs with rainwater already soaking through my shoes, as if the storm had followed me inside. "You embarrass me," he said, voice flat, like he was reading a line from a script he no longer believed. I gripped my phone so hard my fingers hurt because the message on the screen was the reason my stomach had turned to ice. An unfamiliar number, a photo of Derek's hand holding a briefcase, and one sentence that did not feel like a joke. "Tell your husband we want what he took." My name is Zara Mensah, and I have spent my whole life fixing bodies while pretending my own life was not bleeding out. I told Derek, "Someone is threatening us, and I think it's because of you." And the way his jaw clenched told me the truth before he said a single word. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me I was small inside his anger. "Stop making drama," he hissed, then pushed me toward the door like I was a problem he wanted outside. The door slammed, the lock clicked, and the rain hit me like punishment that had been waiting its turn. I stood under the weak light of the apartment hallway for a heartbeat, hoping he would open the door and pull me back, because love makes you stupid in very predictable ways. Instead, I heard his footsteps walking away, and my chest tightened with a grief that tasted like metal. Outside, the street was a blurred mirror, headlights streaking across puddles, and my scrubs clung to my skin in cold, humiliating folds. I tried calling Derek, then my best friend, then my supervisor, but the storm ate my voice and the calls went unanswered. A car slowed near the curb, and for one foolish second, I thought it was Derek coming back to pretend he still had a conscience. The window rolled down, and a stranger's face appeared in the darkness, sharp cheekbones, calm eyes, and a look that said he was not afraid of anything the rain could hide. He spoke with a controlled, almost gentle tone. "Get in," he said, like it was not a request. I backed away, heart pounding. "No," I answered, because I had been trained to recognize danger, and men in clean suits at midnight were never part of a safe story. The man's gaze flicked to my trembling hands, then to the bruised sky above us, and his voice lowered, as if he was offering a secret. "Zara Mensah," he said, pronouncing my name like he already owned it. "You are standing in the open, and someone is looking for you." My blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, and he did not smile, but his expression shifted into something darker, something certain. "Because your husband made a deal," he replied, "and you became the collateral." Then the car door opened by itself, and somewhere behind me, a second set of footsteps splashed through the water, getting closer fast. I ran without a plan, because fear does not wait for logic, and the rain turned the sidewalk into a trap that made my feet slip and my breath burn. The stranger in the suit did not chase me like a desperate man, which somehow terrified me more, because power never rushes when it knows it will win. I cut between parked cars and nearly fell, catching myself on a cold hood, and the smell of wet asphalt filled my lungs like smoke. Behind me, the footsteps gained speed, and a harsh voice snapped through the storm. "There she is." I spun, and in the brief glare of a passing car's headlights, I saw two men, broad shoulders under dark jackets, faces blank with purpose. One of them raised his arm, and I saw the outline of a gun like a black sentence finishing itself. I froze because nurses learned to move toward danger for other people, not for themselves, and my body forgot what to do when I was the one on the table. The stranger's car surged forward, engine low and smooth, and the man I had refused leaned out again. "Zara," he called, his voice cutting through the rain like a blade. "If you do not get in right now, they will not bother taking you alive." The words hit me with a strange clarity, because I believed him instantly, and I hated myself for believing him. The gunman stepped closer. "Come with us," he barked, "and nobody has to get hurt." I heard my own voice shake as I shouted back, "I don't even know you." The gunman's answer was a cruel laugh. "You know your husband," he said, "and that is enough." The stranger opened the back door wider, exposing a warm interior light that spilled onto the street like a doorway to a different life. I made a decision the way you choose a lesser injury, and I dove into the car. The door slammed, sealing out the rain, and the world went muffled for a second, like I had gone underwater. The man in the suit sat beside me, not touching me, but close enough that I felt his heat. "Seatbelt," he said calmly, while the driver accelerated. I fumbled with the belt, hands clumsy, and the car fishtailed around the corner, tires hissing on water. A second vehicle appeared in the rear window, lights off, following like a shadow that knew the route. The man beside me finally looked directly into my eyes, and it was intense in a way that felt personal, like he was reading every bruise inside my thoughts. "My name is Kong Junesio," he said, and even his name sounded expensive and dangerous. I swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, voice small. He glanced at my soaked scrubs, then at my shivering shoulders, and his tone softened in a way that did not match the violence outside. "Because I hate men who throw away what is precious," he replied, and because Derek Cole stole from the wrong people, the car sped toward a bridge, and as we hit the incline, the shadow car behind us surged too, closing the distance fast. The driver, a stoic older Korean man, muttered, "Boss, they're still on us." Juneseo's jaw tightened and he lifted a phone, speaking into it with quiet authority. "Park," he said, "block the bridge." Then he turned back to me, eyes steady, and asked the question that made my heart stop. "Zara," he said, "do you know what your husband hid in your apartment?" The shadow car behind us flashed its high beams, and something metallic clattered against our trunk like a warning that the chase was about to turn into a crash. The bridge lights passed overhead like a strobe, and my pulse matched the rhythm, because every second felt like the last safe one. The driver, Mr. Park, gripped the wheel with calm precision, but even his calm could not hide the fact that we were being hunted. The shadow car surged to our left, trying to pull alongside, and through the rain-smeared window, I saw the passenger raise his arm again. I screamed, "He has a gun!" And Mr. Park did not flinch. Juneseo leaned forward, voice low. "Stay down," he ordered, and the command was so certain my body obeyed before my pride could argue. A sharp crack split the air, and the rear window spidered with a white fracture, glass holding together by sheer stubbornness. I ducked, covering my head, and I hated how small I felt, because I had held dying strangers' hands with steady strength, yet here I was shaking like a child. Juneseo's hand touched my shoulder, firm and warm, not gentle, but protective in a way that sent a strange heat through my chest. "Breathe," he said, and I realized he was counting my breaths like he knew exactly how panic killed. Mr. Park swerved hard, and the shadow car skidded, losing traction for a heartbeat, then recovered with vicious persistence. Ahead, a black SUV suddenly slid across the lane, blocking the bridge like a wall that had appeared out of nowhere. Mr. Park shouted, "Now," and slammed the brakes, then spun the wheel in a perfect controlled drift that made my stomach drop. We slid sideways, missing the SUV by inches, and I saw another man standing beside it, holding an umbrella like a joke in the storm. His face was calm, almost bored, as if chaos was just weather to him. Juneseo's voice turned sharp. "That's not mine," he said, and for the first time, I heard real anger in him. The shadow car behind us slammed into the blocking SUV, metal screaming, and the impact sent debris skittering across the wet road like shrapnel. Our car shot through the gap, tires gripping again, and we flew off the bridge onto a darker road that led away from the city lights. My breath came in broken pieces. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded, forcing my voice to stay loud, because fear makes you quiet if you let it. Juneseo looked at me, and his gaze was steady enough to hold my panic in place. "Somewhere you can't be reached," he answered. "I don't want to be kept," I snapped, anger rising because I had been discarded once already tonight, and I refused to become property again. Juneseo's expression barely changed, but his eyes sharpened. "You are not property," he said, and the intensity of that statement made my throat tighten. "You are a person who deserves protection, whether you accept it or not." I stared at him, drenched and furious and strangely comforted by the way he spoke like rules mattered. "You said Derek stole something?" I whispered. "I'm a nurse, not his partner in crime." Juneseo leaned back, and the interior light caught the clean line of his white collared shirt beneath his black suit, making him look unreal, like a man carved out of midnight. "Then answer me honestly," he said. "When you came home from your last shift, did you notice the closet smelled like new leather?" My mind flashed to a memory I had dismissed. The sharp scent, the briefcase Derek shoved under the bed, the way he snapped, "Don't touch my things, Zara." My voice dropped. He had a briefcase, I admitted, and he was terrified I would open it. Junisio's lips pressed into a thin line. "That briefcase doesn't belong to Derek," he said. "It belongs to people who do not forgive." Mr. Park's phone buzzed, and he listened, then said quietly, "Boss, we have a problem. Another crew is already at the estate." Junisio's eyes hardened. "Then we go faster," he said, and the car surged forward into the dark. I looked out at the rain-smeared trees and felt the world closing in, and when I turned back, Junisio was watching me like he had already decided I mattered. "Zara," he said, voice softer again, "if you trust me for one night, you'll live to hate me tomorrow." Then his phone lit up with a message, and his face went cold as he read it, because the screen showed a photo of my apartment door and Derek standing beside it, smiling like he had already sold me twice. The estate did not look like a home, and that was the first warning that my life had crossed an invisible border. Iron gates rose out of the rain, tall and silent, and when they opened, the driveway stretched toward a mansion that glowed warm and golden against the storm like a lighthouse built for criminals. Marble steps, wide pillars, and glass that reflected lightning in sharp white flashes made the place feel unreal, like wealth pretending it was innocent. Mr. Park drove fast, tires whispering over wet stone, and the front doors opened before we even stopped, revealing a woman in a dark dress standing straight as a knife. Her hair was pinned into a neat bun, and her face showed no surprise at seeing me soaked and shaking. Junisio stepped out first, and the woman bowed slightly. "Madame Yoon," he said, and his voice carried authority that filled the driveway. "Get her warm clothes." Now I climbed out slowly, legs weak, and the cold hit me again like a slap. Juniso turned, and for a moment his body blocked the rain from my face. "Stay close," he told me, and the instruction should have made me angry, but instead it made me feel safe in a way I had not felt in months. Madame Yoon approached me with a thick towel without asking permission, draping it over my shoulders like she had done it 1,000 times for women who arrived broken. "Come," she said quietly, her English precise. "You will catch pneumonia." I should have argued, but I was tired, and the warmth spilling from the open doors made my bones ache for comfort. Inside, the mansion smelled like polished wood and expensive candles, and chandeliers hung above marble floors that gleamed like frozen water. I looked down at my wet scrubs leaving faint footprints and felt humiliation burn my cheeks. Juniso noticed because he noticed everything, and his tone softened again. "You saved lives in those scrubs," he said. "Do not apologize for them." I swallowed, surprised by how the words steadied me. Madame Yoon led me down a hallway lined with art that looked too calm for a man like him, and I heard distant voices, deep and tense, echoing from another room. When we reached a guest suite, she opened the door to a bedroom so luxurious it felt like a trap. A fireplace flickered. A bed the size of a raft waited under soft linen. Fresh clothes were already laid out, including a simple robe that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. Madame Yoon turned to me, eyes assessing. "You are safe here," she said, then paused, and the smallest crack of emotion appeared. "As safe as anyone can be, when men like him decide you matter." Before I could ask what she meant, she left, closing the door quietly behind her. I stood alone, listening to the storm and the distant murmur of men who sounded like weapons being loaded. My phone buzzed again, and my hands shook as I looked. A new message from the unknown number. "Bring the briefcase, or we take her heart piece by piece." My throat tightened until it hurt. I heard a knock, and when I opened the door, Junisio stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a statue and more like a man who had fought his whole life to keep control. "Show me your phone," he said. I held it out, and he read the message, expression darkening. "They're getting impatient," he murmured. "Who are they?" I asked, voice cracking. Juniso met my eyes, and for a moment the mansion felt smaller, like the truth was pressing against the walls. "A man named Viktor Sokolov," he said, "and the network he feeds." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Junisio said it made it sound like a curse. "Why is my husband involved?" I whispered. Junisio's jaw flexed. "Because Derek wanted money he didn't earn," he replied, then stepped closer, close enough that I felt his heat and the faint clean scent of his cologne under the rain. And, because he thought you were too loyal to leave, the words cut deep because they were accurate. My eyes burned. I did leave, I said, forcing the sentence out. He pushed me out. Junesio's gaze dropped to my mouth for a fraction of a second, and that tiny shift made my breath catch, because desire can appear in the middle of fear like a match in a dark room. He looked back into my eyes, and his voice lowered. Then let me be the man who brings you in, he said. My heart stumbled. I don't belong here, I whispered. Junesio lifted his hand and, with careful restraint, brushed a damp curl away from my forehead, as if testing whether tenderness would scare me. You belong where you are respected, he said, and tonight, that is here. Then a gunshot cracked somewhere on the property, sharp and real, and the mansion alarms began to scream. The hallway exploded into motion, heavy footsteps pounding marble, voices barking in Korean, and the calm luxury shattered into something raw and violent. I ran out of the suite barefoot, robe clutched tight, and the cold floor bit into my skin as if the mansion itself demanded payment. Junesio grabbed my wrist, pulling me behind him, and his body became a shield without hesitation. Mr. Park appeared from the shadows, gun drawn, face calm like a man who had rehearsed this exact nightmare. Perimeter breach, he reported. 2 teams, maybe more. Madame Yoon stood at the end of the hall, expression composed, but her hands were clenched tight. Safe room is ready, she said, and I realized this house had planned for disaster the way hospitals plan for mass casualties. Junesio looked back at me, eyes fierce. Do exactly what I say, he ordered, and I hated how my heart responded to his command with a pulse of trust. I'm not your soldier, I snapped, trying to reclaim some dignity. His gaze did not soften, but his voice did. No, he said. You are the reason I will burn this world down if I have to. This statement hit me like a confession, and it made me angry because I did not know him well enough to deserve words like that, yet my chest tightened like it recognized the truth anyway. We moved fast down a narrow corridor, and I heard shouting outside, then another gunshot, closer, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. My nurse instincts took over. Someone is hurt, I said automatically, and tried to pull away toward the noise. Junesio yanked me back. Not you, he growled. Not tonight, I glared at him. You can't tell me to ignore a wounded person, I said, voice shaking with rage and fear. He leaned in, close enough that his breath warmed my cheek, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that felt like a grip. Zara, he said, if you walk into that hallway, you become their leverage, and then more people die because you wanted to be brave. The logic was brutal, but it landed because I understood Triav, and I understood how quickly one mistake became a body count. We reached a door hidden behind a wall panel, and Madame Yoon pressed her palm to a scanner, opening it smoothly. The safe room inside was concrete and steel, stocked with water, medical supplies, and a small camera screen showing the outside grounds. On the screen, figures moved through the rain like ghosts, and security lights swung, catching flashes of weapons. My stomach turned. Junesio stepped inside with me, and the door sealed with a heavy thud that made my heart pound harder. Why are they here? I asked, forcing myself to keep speaking so panic would not swallow me. Junesio stared at the camera feed, jaw set. Because Victor thinks Derek still has his property, he said. And because Victor believes fear makes people talk, Mr. Park's voice came through a speaker. Boss, one of them got past the outer wall, he reported, and he's asking for you by name. Juneso's eyes narrowed. He wants a show, he murmured, then finally turned to face me fully. In the harsh safe room light, he looked less like a myth and more like a man carrying too many scars inside his silence. Zara, he said, I need you to tell me everything about Derek's last week. Every odd detail you dismissed. My mind flashed to Derek's sudden new watch, his secret calls, the way he flinched at sirens, the briefcase, and one memory that now felt like a loaded gun. He said something in his sleep. I whispered. Junesio's gaze sharpened. What did he say? I swallowed, throat dry. He said, I swapped it, I swear I swapped it, I told him. And then he begged someone named Victor not to punish him, The moment the name left my mouth, the camera feed flickered, and the screen showed a man stepping into the security light, face pale, eyes cold, holding an umbrella like the storm belonged to him. He looked directly into the camera, like he knew we were watching, and he smiled slowly. Then he lifted his phone, and my own phone rang in my hand, vibrating like a heartbeat gone wrong. Juniso stared at it, then at me, and his voice dropped into something deadly calm.
"Answer it," he said.
I raised the phone to my ear, breath trembling, and the voice on the other end was smooth, amused, and terrifying. "Hello, Zara Mensa," Viktor Sokolov said softly. "Tell my friend Junicio that I have come to take what your husband promised me." Victor's voice slid through the phone like oil, calm and confident, and it made my skin crawl because men who sounded relaxed during violence were always the most dangerous. I looked at Junicio before answering, and he gave the slightest nod, not as permission, but as trust. "What do you want?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady the way I did with patients who were bleeding out but still listening.
Victor chuckled swiftly.
"What your husband stole," he replied, "and since he seems to have misplaced it, I will accept you instead." My stomach dropped. "I don't belong to you," I snapped, anger flaring through fear.
Victor sai titricoj.
"Nobody belongs to anyone," he said, "but everyone has a price, my dear." I felt Junicio's presence behind me, solid and close, his hand hovering near my back without touching, like he was giving me space to stand on my own. "Derek doesn't have it anymore," I said. "If he ever did," Victor's tone sharpened slightly. "Lying for a man who threw you into the rain is not a good look," he murmured. The words hit too close, and Junicio's hand finally settled on my waist, firm and grounding, as if to remind me I was not alone in this exchange. "Listen carefully," Victor continued. "You have 1 hour. Bring me the briefcase, or I start removing pieces of your life until something breaks." The call ended abruptly, leaving the safe room humming with tension. I lowered the phone slowly, hands shaking, and Junicio stepped fully in front of me now, his face dark with something that felt like fury barely contained. "He will not touch you," he said, voice low and absolute. "You can't promise that," I replied, hating the fear in my own honesty. Junicio's eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability crack through his control. "I promise I will die first," he said quietly. The words stole my breath, not because they were dramatic, but because they were said like a fact. I reached out without thinking, fingers curling into the fabric of his rolled sleeve, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath. "I don't want anyone to die because of me," I whispered. Junicio lifted his other hand, cupping my cheek with a gentleness that did not belong in a room like this. "You are not the cause," he said. "You are the reason." The alarms outside fell silent suddenly, and Mr. Park's voice came through again. "Boss," he said, tense. "They're pulling back." Junicio frowned. "That means he's changing tactics," he replied. I swallowed hard. "He mentioned the briefcase," I said, mind racing. "Derek said he swapped something." Junicio's gaze sharpened with interest. "Swapped what?" I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember details I had ignored out of trust and exhaustion. "There was another bag," I said slowly. "A medical supply bag." He told me not to touch. Junicio straightened instantly. "Where is it now?" I opened my eyes. "In my car," I answered, heart pounding. "I left it in the trunk after a double shift." Silence filled the room, heavy with possibility, and then Junicio smiled faintly, dangerous and relieved at the same time. "Then your husband is more stupid than I thought," he said. He looked at me with something close to admiration. "And you," he added softly, "may have just saved us both." The plan formed quickly, sharp and efficient, but underneath it ran a current of something far more personal that neither of us named out loud. Mr. Park retrieved my car under cover of the storm while Junicio stayed with me in the safe room, refusing to let distance grow between us. I changed into dry clothes, simple black pants, and a soft sweater Madamine provided, and when I stepped back into the room, Junicio's eyes lingered in a way that made my pulse skip. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," I admitted. The truth was terrifying, because fear and desire had tangled together inside me, and his presence felt like gravity. When Mr. Park returned with the bag, Juneso opened it carefully, revealing stacks of documents, encrypted drives, and sealed packets that looked nothing like money. Evidence, he murmured. Derek thought he was trading power for protection. I laughed bitterly. He always wanted shortcuts, I said. Junesio looked at me. Victor will come for this personally, he said. And when he does, he will underestimate you, I frowned.
Why?
Junesio stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because men like him never believe a woman left in the rain can become a storm, he replied. The words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. The confrontation happened at dawn, when the rain finally softened into mist and the world held its breath. Victor arrived at the estate gates alone, confident enough to think himself untouchable. Junesio went out to meet him, and I watched from the balcony, heart pounding, because part of me wanted to run to him, and part of me knew I had my own role to play. Victor smiled when he saw Junesio. You always were dramatic, he said. Junesio replied evenly. You always were careless. When Victor demanded the briefcase, I stepped forward before Junesio could stop me, holding up the medical bag. Victor's eyes flicked to me, surprise flashing briefly before amusement returned. He said. The nurse, I met his gaze without flinching. The evidence, I corrected.
Victor left.
You think that scares me? I smiled back, slow and deliberate. It should, I said. Because it's already gone, his smile vanished. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and Victor's face twisted with rage as realization hit. Junesio moved instantly, men flooding the courtyard, weapons trained, power shifting in seconds. Victor glared at me. You chose him, he spat. I stepped closer to Junesio, feeling his hand slide into mine, solid and certain. I chose myself, I said. Victor was taken away screaming threats that no longer mattered, and when the courtyard finally fell silent, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden. Junesio turned to me, searching my face. It's over, he said. I let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob, and before I could stop myself, I threw my arms around him. He held me tightly, like he had been waiting for permission, and for the first time since that door slammed behind me, I felt safe enough to cry. The days that followed were strange and quiet, like the aftermath of a storm that leaves everything looking unfamiliar but clean. Derek was arrested, his lies finally exposed, and when I saw him in custody, I felt nothing but relief. Junesio gave me space without distance, checking on me with gentle consistency that made trust grow where fear had lived. One evening, as we sat on the terrace overlooking the city, he finally spoke the question hanging between us. What happens now? He asked. I looked at him, at the man who had pulled me out of the rain and into a world that demanded strength I did not know I had. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I don't want to go back to who I was. Junesio nodded slowly. Neither do I, he said. Silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable, until he reached for my hand again. Zara, he said, voice low, I won't cage you. I squeezed his fingers. I wouldn't stay if you did, I replied. He smiled, genuine and rare, and leaned in, stopping just short of my lips. Then stay because you want to, he whispered. I closed the distance, kissing him softly at first, then with growing certainty, and the world narrowed to warmth, trust, and the quiet promise of something real. The rain had ended, the night had passed, and for the first time, I felt like the future was not something chasing me, but something I was walking toward, hand in hand with the man who never let go.